Welcome to the Wildverse podcast, where we introduce you to the wild world of taxidermy, a place where artists and hunters collide. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Heather.
For this week's episode, we thought we would research a few of the health threats that we taxidermists may encounter. It's easy to forget about the possible zoonotic diseases and various illnesses that we could possibly contract from the wildlife that we work on every day.
Yes, so in this episode, we're going to be covering just a few of the common and the not so common things that may make you think twice about wearing those gloves and washing your hands a few seconds longer than you did before.
I know I could probably be a little bit better about that sometimes. I'm sure we all could.
Yes, yeah. I should wear gloves more than I do, but maybe I will now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to do. I mean, modern medicine can only get you so far. So
Yes,
preventative medicine is the best medicine.
absolutely.
All right. Well, the first and most common zoonotic virus that most everyone knows about is rabies. Most people know that rabies virus is transmitted through direct contact with saliva or brain/nervous system tissue from an infected animal. That contact must be through either your broken skin or like mucous membranes, such as through the eyes, nose, or the mouth.
Yeah, so just an interesting fact about rabies. I figured it was around forever, but actually, North America did not have rabies until somewhere in the 1700s when it was introduced by people bringing over infected dogs. Assuming that it was brought over with the European settlers, it was, of course, then spread to many wild mammals and carried on throughout the country and the continent. It was more prevalent in the coon population in the southeast, and apparently they trapped coons in the southeast and brought up to the mid-Atlantic to like restore the populations, and then it became widespread there as well.
Oh, I did not know that either. I would have assumed that rabies has just always been a prevalent virus in wild populations, but
Yeah.
it's not.
No, apparently it was, over in Europe and stuff where maybe more things were domesticated. That would be kind of curious. I should have researched that. Like, how did rabies, if anybody knew how rabies started? Because one of the questions was if Native Americans had to deal with rabies. And that's when I found this info that, they didn't deal with that at all until the Europeans and stuff came over.
Well, I did look up one bit of information about this, and the only state in the United States that's never had a case of rabies in either animals or people is Hawaii. So that checks
Oh,
out that like it would have to be transported there, via ship or obviously via plane or something. And so since,
yeah.
that's just not likely, they have never had a verified case of rabies there.
Yeah, and I bet too, like if you're moving there or something, like your any animals you bring with you are gonna have to be like vaccinated. They're
Oh
not
yeah.
gonna let something come over that it doesn't have its health charts all in order.
I've heard it's a lot easier to bring an animal like to Hawaii or from Hawaii to the United States than the opposite way.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
so much more easier. And well, yeah, because like Hawaii doesn't have snakes, right? So they're
yeah,
super careful about letting people in with animals.
yeah. That makes sense.
So the most common animals to contract rabies would be bats, skunks, foxes, and of course raccoons. So it's always good to assume caution when handling these species. Animals that rarely contract the virus would be rodents such as rabbits, squirrels, chipmunks, and rats. And lastly, animals that never get rabies would be reptiles, amphibians, birds, fish, and insects.
Yeah, like I didn't realize that. I'm assuming their body temperatures are different, but you reptile guys and fish guys and bird guys, you're good to go. you don't you don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah, if you're not dealing with any of like the common animals that contract rabies, you're probably fine too. Or even possums. Possums are pretty much immune to rabies because their body temperature is either too low or too high. I can't remember.
Yes, yeah, I think it's too low.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah. I always know, as a kid, you get like bats are a big no. Like you do not touch a bat,
Yeah.
which, that kind of ties into how you contract rabies. If you don't have any cuts on your hands, but then if a bat bites you, you're done. Like I know there was a story back when I watched like ER shows and stuff. This girl had come in and she was like really super sick and they could not figure out what was wrong with her. They eventually found out that she had rabies. Like, most people know when they get in contact with rabies and they end up getting those miserable shots that go in your butt cheek.
Oh,
Like they're horrible. Like nobody wants to get rabies shots. So, anyways, this girl goes there and she has rabies. She had contracted it like 10 years prior. So it took that long to really get into her system and wreak havoc, I guess, which is
like it
really
slept
surprising.
dormant in her
Yeah,
system.
yeah. And she got it from a bat. And how they got rid of it is, I guess, once it reaches that stage, like, you're pretty much dead.
You're doomed, yeah.
Yes, but they ended up putting her into a medical coma, and that got her through it, and she survived, and I think she's the only person who ever survived from rabies like that.
Wow. So, yeah, it's, like you're saying, when it gets to the point where you're seeing symptoms, that's when it's deadly, right? Like, you're
Yes.
kinda not
Yeah.
coming out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of having rabies, the big question is, can I contract rabies from a dead animal that I'm skinning? I know I have always wondered this. And the answer to that is possibly.
Yeah, so while the rabies virus can survive outside the body for only a short amount of time, it can survive inside of a dead body for much longer. So you cannot contract it through the animal's blood, urine, or feces, but you want to be very careful around the saliva and nervous system fluids, so like the brain and spinal tissue. The virus becomes non infectious when it either dries out, is heated, or is exposed to sunlight.
So, what I always think of is the riskiest thing when you're skinning an animal is if you nick yourself, like when
Yeah.
you're skinning it. I typically think of bacteria and stuff, but you never know if the coon you're skinning or red fox you're skinning has rabies in it and you're skinning around its mouth. It does say if it's exposed to sunlight, but does that count in your shop because that's not sunlight?
Yeah, and heat, you're saying like if you put the animal in the freezer, I guess that actually slows the lifespan of the rabies virus too. It
Okay.
can actually prolong it a little while. So you would think that would kill it,
Hmm.
but no, actually that might counteract it. Like it's the heat is what actually kills it, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe that possum body heat was too hot. I thought they said it was too low, but
I can't remember.
regardless, it is scary. Like if you're skinning that mouth and you nick yourself, like I guess I don't know. That's a really touchy thing though, because you can't go to the hospital every time you nick yourself skinning a coon or red fox or something.
Yeah, so I guess it's just, you want to be super careful around those
Yeah.
areas. Obviously, if you're dealing with any kind of like brain matter, probably just leave that out of it if you can anyway. But yeah, just be super careful. And then, it will survive in a dead body for longer. So wait a little while to skin it if you can. Obviously, you don't want to wait too long just because then you're dealing with decomposition anyway. But,
Yeah.
just be super careful.
Yeah, yeah, because I feel like all the stars would have to align for somebody to shoot or trap an animal that even had it, and then bring it to you in the amount of time that it's still, alive and you could
Yeah.
possibly catch it. Yeah, I just I doubt it's ever happened, but it's also just a little scary that you just, like you said, you just want to be careful.
Yeah, on the safe side. And like so I did say, being in the freezer could like prolong the virus, but if you put an animal in the freezer for like, multiple days or hours, I would think that would probably kill it if you did want to be on the extra safe side, which I probably wouldn't go that route just to skin an animal for that reason.
Yeah.
Because rabies is like, it's pretty rare that humans actually get it. I think there's like less than 1,000 cases in the United States a year for people,
Okay.
maybe even less than that.
Okay.
Like it's not very common here. I think it's more common like in, like Asia and different
Yeah,
third world countries, that kind of thing.
that is very true.
Yeah, not super common, but something to look out for.
Yeah, I remember seeing that in other countries it's a lot more prevalent that,
Yep.
if you get bitten by a dog, you might have rabies. So it just
Yeah,
that's not how it is here because mostly everybody vaccinates. So
I think that's what I read is like places, that have a lot of stray dogs. Like I guess, India, it can be pretty prevalent because they've got a lot of stray dogs there. And then obviously dogs are one of the carriers of rabies.
yeah, definitely something scary and to keep right there and just in case, you ever encounter it and think there's a chance that you might have came in contact with it, you definitely want to go to the doctor because the
Yeah.
sooner they can get you those shots, you'll be okay if you get the shots. You just don't want to let it go.
I know, because man, like we said, once you start seeing symptoms, it's kind of too late. That's the scary part about rabies.
Yep, absolutely.
Because I heard too, they used to call rabies, instead of before they named it rabies, they called it like the fear of water, because obviously rabies makes you like hydrophobic.
Huh. I feel like I remember hearing something about it with water, but I almost thought that it made you. Oh, yeah, because if you can't keep anything down.
Yeah, it like contracts your the swallowing muscles, and so even
Mhm.
just the thought of swallowing will make you fear water. So that's the
Mm,
idea behind it. Like the rabies makes you fear water, just the swallowing portion of that. So that's scary.
mm.
If you got to the point where you're feeling that, then you're kind of too late.
Yeah, that would just be horrible. So let's
Oh
hope
my
that doesn't
gosh.
happen to anybody. Let's
Yeah,
not put that in the universe to accept that.
it's super unlikely, but yeah, it's good to know where you can contract it, how you can contract it. Be careful.
Yep.
This episode of Wildverse is sponsored by Pro One Performance Chemicals. Pro One specializes in tanning chemicals for the professional taxidermist. They offer a complete line of tanning products to provide you with everything you need to tan your next tide. I really like their ProMax tan for my personal tanning projects. They make it so simple, it's easy to follow instructions printed right on the bottle. I actually used Pro One to tan the deer that I won with at Nationals, and I was using this same tan to tan some bobcats last week. It's super versatile. Not only does Pro One have you covered for all your tanning needs, they also sell Pro One Hide Paste, the industry standard in glue. Heather and I both use Pro One Hide Paste on every single mount. We love it. It has a thick consistency that makes it easy to apply to the form, yet it's soft and pliable enough that it can be easily manipulated under the skin after you throw the hide on. If you haven't tried Pro One Hide Paste, I am telling you, you are missing out. And now, as of 2024, you can order Pro One products directly online at pro1performancechemicals.com. That's PRO, the number one, performancechemicals.com. So, the next disease that you may have never even heard of is tularemia. Am I saying that right, Heather?
I think it's pronounced tularemia. Yeah.
Okay. Commonly known as rabbit fever. I know it by that name. It is actually caused by a bacterium that is found in animals, and it is especially prevalent in rodents, rabbits, and hares.
So does that mean there's another reason for me to despise mounting snowshoe hares?
uh, right? Yes. Yes, there is. Well, maybe because people typically become infected through handling infected or sick animals, eating or drinking contaminated food or water, inhaling airborne bacteria, or the bite of an infected insect, such as ticks and deer flies.
Ah, okay.
Can be contracted in many different ways. But yeah, maybe taxidermy snowshoe hares is on the list
Another
too.
reason to be like, I'm not taking any rabbits.
Nope, rabbit fever.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
I guess seeing that you can get it from ticks and deer flies too. I mean, that's another one of those darn friggin' tick related disease that we should always try to watch out for. As much as you can keep ticks away, the better.
Ah, man, I know. Those are like the enemy of taxidermists or ticks.
Yes. Yeah, they have wreak havoc. So tularemia is a very widespread disease in animals with actually around like 200 human cases reported in the US each year, which to me like 200 is not a lot, but that's a decent amount of people that run into I guess rabbits or rodents or whatever and get
Yeah.
sick. So good news for me on the East Coast at least is that almost all the cases occur in the western and south central states. So sorry for you Ashley. I think that would
Ah,
be your area.
yeah. I'm in the hot spot for it, I guess. Maybe do you think it's because like we have different species of like rodents and rabbits?
Maybe. That would maybe be my guess.
Do you guys have like jackrabbits out there?
No, we definitely do not have all we have are cottontails and snowshoes.
Oh, you do have snowshoe hares? Huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I wonder if that has something to do with it, just like the different species or who knows.
Yeah. Have you ever known like have you ever heard anybody talk about rabbit fever?
Uh, I don't think so. I think I've just heard stuff here and there, but I've never like heard of anybody contracting it or anything like that.
Okay. I know that I've always heard that people don't kill rabbits like you can't like before the first frost or something because of like worms or I don't know what it was. I don't know if you ever heard that either.
Maybe.
Hmm.
That sounds familiar, but I could be lying. So,
Yeah, who knows? They're I mean, rodents and rabbits and stuff have all sorts of you always know that you handle them with care.
yeah. So, and I mean, and people eat rabbits too. So, like, if
Mhm.
you are eating rabbits, I know you can contract rabbit fever from that. So, you need to make sure their meat is cooked thoroughly, just like you would any kind of meat.
Yeah. Yeah, that would make sense.
The possible symptoms to look for if you contract the bacteria through handling are skin ulcers, swollen and painful lymph glands, inflamed eyes, sore throat, mouth sores, digestive issues, and pneumonia. There are separate symptoms if the bacteria is inhaled. such as fever, chills, headache, muscle aches, dry cough, and progressive weaknesses are just a few.
The inflamed eyes just, like, instantly made my eyes get watery. So, I mean, it sounds like, though, inhaling the bacteria is rare. When I was reading about it, it was like most cases happen in laboratories, so I wouldn't
Oh,
say that's much of a concern. It seems like it's a little more, washing your hands, like you said, don't eat undercooked meat, things like that.
yeah, and it sounds like the symptoms are slightly obvious too, not,
Yeah.
quite like rabies where all of a sudden you're dead. So there
Yeah.
is actual symptoms. And so like if you're experiencing stuff like that and you're like, what is going on with me? I don't know, it could be rabbit fever.
Yeah, I mean, I will be honest though, if I other than the skin ulcers and maybe, like, the eyes and mouth sores, like, I wouldn't go to the doctor right away. I would just think that,
Yeah.
like, you're sick, you know?
Allergies or something like that.
Yeah, just something. I have a cold, I have the flu. I those ulcers would definitely give it away.
Right, especially, big, lesions on your skin. Because so, yeah,
Yeah.
if you suspect you have contracted the rabbit fever, it is very important to seek medical attention quickly since the bacteria is fatal if left untreated. A hefty dose of antibiotic regimen is usually the course of treatment.
Yeah, so please be careful with those rodents, rabbits, and hares.
Ah, that fever.
Yes, yeah, that would be, no thank you.
At least that one's an easy one to remember, rabbit fever. Be careful
Yeah,
around rabbits.
yeah, tularemia is a little vague, but I
That's a
had to put,
mouthful.
fancy terms in here to make it
Yeah.
sound official. So, the last health concern is one that I would have never thought about until I did my research. It is the infectious disease B. anthasis, and that is commonly known as the ever so scary anthrax.
Uh, and to me, I really didn't know exactly what, like, anthrax was, like, I've heard of it, but I really wasn't aware of I knew it was, like, anthrax poisoning, you hear about that, but I really
Mhm.
didn't know that that was an issue that perhaps taxidermists could face.
Yeah, I didn't either because here in the US it's not super prevalent. But, there was that 9/11 anthrax scare where like they were mailing letters to people in the US and it killed somewhere around like 7 people and like another 17 were sick just by handling the mail. Like I don't even think they had to open it. I think just handling the letters, like the post office people got sick.
So how does that tie into something that us taxidermists may ever have to encounter or ever have to worry about?
So I wouldn't say that it's something that we should exactly like worry about, as more like something to keep in the back of our minds when we're handling animals from other parts of the world.
So yeah, I guess like a lot of the viruses that we can encounter, they're not like as common in the US, but they're still here. So, just because they happen more prevalently in other parts of the world doesn't mean they're not something to, consider, right?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
So even though anthrax is rare in the US, many taxidermists in the country do handle species that come from anthrax prevalent countries: Central America, South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, parts of Asia, Southern and Eastern Europe, and the Caribbean Sea are all areas where anthrax is most common. The US does occasionally have outbreaks in cattle or deer, but with routine vaccinations, we can keep those outbreaks at bay.
Yeah, so it makes a little more sense now why importing animals is so like strictly regimented. I
Yeah.
know sometimes I get lax about that because we are so lucky here in the US. You think like, ah, like they're probably, they're fine. But when you think where these animals are coming from in these other countries, it's easy to forget why the dipping and the paperwork is so important.
Yeah, like why the importation laws are so strict, and it makes sense even though it is kind of a pain in the butt sometimes, or
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It is like, you think you're like, oh, like what could they have? But they're like, for instance, in Africa, I mean, there is like a lot of it. So it is important to be careful and make sure that like, those importation, the USDA, Fish and Wildlife people, we deal with some people that, are really difficult. If all your T's aren't perfectly crossed and your I's perfectly dotted, they have issues.
right. And you got to remember they're doing it for a reason, because
Yeah.
yeah, it's like a pain in the butt, but these outbreaks, they can severely hurt our wildlife populations and us. We wouldn't want an outbreak of anthrax
Yeah,
amongst
gosh,
people.
no.
Oh
No,
my
thanks. I don't
gosh.
want, my animals to get it and die even. Like, I know that sounds horrible. You were just talking about people, and I'm like, yeah, I don't want my animals to get sick.
Yeah.
But I don't. I don't. So I guess what I don't understand though is how. is anthrax contracted, and how can I, as a taxidermist, make sure that like I'm being cautious?
So, anthrax spores can get into your body through inhalation, eating or drinking contaminated food or drink, or the spores can enter through a cut or scrape in the skin from contact with an infected animal or animal products. So, kind of similar to any other, virus, they get into your body. The spores, and anthrax, it can be airborne too. So that's just if you're working with an animal.
Yeah. So I think when I was researching about it, the spores aren't toxic. It's like when the spores get into your body, that is when they turn into anthrax. Like the B dot anthasis is like the spore, but then once it enters your body, it turns into anthrax and is toxic.
Oh, like the chemical process in our body
Yeah.
turns
Yeah.
it into anthrax, and then it's toxic. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy, but it seems to be very unpredictable as to whether you will contract any illness if you are exposed to the spores. So, for example, in Kruger National Park in Africa, they had had 3 major outbreaks where workers were then, dissecting, handling, they were burning the carcasses, and there were no reported contractions of the disease. With all that, they should have been around it, um, but then in Canada, there was an outbreak in the Wood Buffalo National Park where one worker was handling carcasses without proper protection, as he wasn't handling gloves, probably didn't have a mask on, and he developed the disease. And there was one backhoe worker who I guess had to clean his tracks out, so he climbed underneath his backhoe, and so he's rolling around, in the anthrax-ridden dirt or the spore-ridden dirt and hair from the bison, and he ended up getting sick too, but that's because he was rolling around in it.
Huh. So yeah, probably rolling around, and then dust is flying up and breathing that in, and
Yeah, yeah, so it seems like maybe you gotta really be around a lot of it.
possibly, yeah. I've heard of it like being in the dirt and being in the soil. But then again, there was those crazy outbreaks like the one in Zimbabwe, which lasted like 8 years with 10,000 people infected. The main
Mm,
consistency in all those cases, they were skinning and butchering sick and dead animals, handling contaminated meat, and eating raw or undercooked meat.
okay, so that just sounds like it was they again, it's not like they were being careful around it at all, they
Yeah,
were
they were not being
probably
careful.
hygiene wasn't very good. They're probably, touching that, touching something else, touching their drinks, like, eating the raw meat. Yeah, that seems like they were putting themselves in a lotta danger.
Right, just not being as careful as, like, we maybe normally are, like, it's we have all these procedures for a reason, like, how often we wash our hands. Some people might be like, "Oh, we wash our hands too much." Well, maybe not. So,
Yeah, yeah, it does seem like this one, at least, you have to have a lot of it around, or really be practicing some really horrible practices, like hygiene practices and stuff, so I'd imagine if you're careful, you should be fine.
right, just being careful around these animals, and, like, do you know what kinds of animals are most, like, susceptible to being, anthrax ridden?
Yeah, so it sounds like it's like antelope, deer, cattle, and like goats. So like goats kind of fall into the area of like deer-ish
Yeah,
animals, cervids.
ruminants and
Yes, yeah, which probably makes sense too. Maybe it has to do with being ruminants as well. Like they had, I feel like when I was reading, there was something about there was like goat hair and goat hides that were coming out of somewhere in Africa and going into, I don't even know, I don't remember what country it was, but they were having some anthrax issues
Hmm,
because these goat hides weren't properly treated and were getting shipped all over, like, I guess, touristy type stuff or something.
eek. So, they must have been, like, some kind of rawhide, because I would imagine, like, the tanning process probably kills a
Um,
lot of that.
I'm not positive because now I didn't put anything in here about how it's killed because there were no good answers on to how it's killed. There's a lot of different info when you research that. So some of it said like if you're wiping down a surface of your counter, you want like a 10% Clorox or 10% like bleach solution. And if you leave it, you have to leave it on for a little bit. Like you
Hmm.
can't just quickly wipe it off and think it's good to go. They had said that, like, burning it doesn't kill it. UV radiation might kill it, like, if it's a real high-powered UV light or whatever they use to disinfect stuff. Yeah, it was there's a lot of I think a spore is kind of hard to, like, kill because I guess it's not alive.
Well, spores, those are like mushrooms, aren't they? I don't know,
Yeah,
right? Like they're a
yeah.
fungus. Is anthrax? It's a fungus.
I guess so, 'cause if a spore's fungus, it might be. Let me Google that
Yeah,
really
let's
quick.
give it a goog.
Alright, is anthrax a fungus?
Oh, it's a bacteria, so it's really not a fungus because it's a
Okay,
bacteria.
yeah, yeah. Bacillus anthracis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess not. I guess I was thinking, yeah, like you said, fungus I mean, spore relates to fungus. It's a spore-forming bacterium. That's what I found there, but, yeah, it mainly affects livestock and wild game, and they get it from the soil.
Well, it is, rare, but it's also potentially fatal.
Yeah, it's not very good if you do get it. And,
No.
it makes sense if it's in the soil, that makes sense why the African taxidermists can't put, like, actual dirt and stuff on their bases.
Oh, I didn't know that. I wasn't aware of that.
They can't send anything natural back.
Oh, I did not know that. So, like, when they make habitats and they send the mounts back here, they can't have any actual
Yeah.
organic material or soil or anything like that.
Yep,
Huh.
yep, can't have any of that, so that makes sense, I had heard that and you kinda wonder, like, why does that matter? That's, like, stupid." Well, apparently it's not
Yeah.
stupid.
No,
There's
because
a
yeah, if it's
reason.
if it's more common over there, right.
Yeah.
But it looks like though, if you do contract anthrax, it can be treated with antibiotics and it can cure most anthrax infections.
Okay.
So it is like curable if you do get it, but it definitely can be fatal. So that's, not something to sleep on.
Yeah, yeah, and, I wonder too, when those crates come over from Africa, like, are the people I think the people might open them and look, and they look at your paperwork, but other than that, I don't think they can, like, test for anthrax. I'm assuming
Hmm.
they just probably don't let anything in that came from an area with an outbreak.
Right. They just look to see if it's treated and all that, I'm sure. Like if
Yeah.
the preventative measures have been taken, and then if yes, you would assume it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, you would think so. But yeah, just something to really keep in mind and like we hope that the hides that we handle from the other countries are treated well enough to kill anthrax spores, but it probably is a good precaution to wear gloves and maybe even a mask when you're opening those crates that come in from overseas. Probability of illness is low, but erring on the side of caution is never a bad idea.
Right. Yeah, we didn't mean to scare you or make you feel like you need to wrap yourself in bubble wrap while handling raw animals, but it's always a good idea to be educated just in case, like
Yeah.
specific species, be a little more cautious. Like you're saying, if you have a shipment from a different country, be a little cautious on how you handle that.
Yeah. Yeah, because you never know if somebody took some shortcuts over there. They were busy that day, they just threw it in there and didn't worry about anything else, and you just never know, like, you could be handling it those salted hides are really stiff and, like, kinda have some sharp edges.
Yeah, true.
Slice your finger when you grab it to pick it up to send it to the tannery, I don't know. I feel like it's a little extreme, but like we said, that caution is always kind of nice to keep in your mind.
Yeah, yeah, some of these measures we've talked about, yeah, it might be a little extreme, but there is a reason that some of these viruses are contracted because it only takes one moment of something happening for it to infect you.
Yeah, and I would rather have people be informed that like just in case you're having some like weird symptoms or sicknesses, like I feel like some hospitals or doctors won't ever look for something like that.
Yeah, so that's another point too. That like if you are having kind of crazy symptoms and like not sure, explaining that you're a taxidermist might help. Like that
Yeah.
might, narrow down what's going on. It might
Yeah,
help you come
yeah.
to a conclusion on something. Or if you are a deer taxidermist and all of a sudden you got in a random rabbit and then all of a sudden you're feeling sick.
Yeah. Maybe tie those two things together.
Yeah, just kind of keep it in mind.
So I have just a real quick little story to kind of wrap this whole episode up with. Speaking of explaining to these doctors that you're a taxidermist, I had a scary moment one time when I was skinning a rattlesnake. Well, I actually was taking a mold of the head of
Oh,
this
no.
rattlesnake.
You can see where this is going.
I pulled the head out of the silicone mold that I made, and I just wasn't thinking. I think I even I had gloves on because snakes are just dirty. They freak me out. Like I like them, but they're just ugh, I don't wanna touch
Yeah.
them with my hands because I feel like they got a lot of the bacteria on them. Anyways, I picked up its head just to look at it, and for some reason, like, its head was, like, sitting here, and for some reason, instead of, like, I don't know, maybe, like, grabbing it and, like, sitting it down, I just kinda, slid my hand out from under it so it would drop,
Okay.
and I felt something catch my finger. I was like, "Ow, what is that?" Its freaking fang was poked through the bottom of its mouth from me pulling it out of that mold, and its fang sliced my finger pretty much from a little bit behind my middle knuckle there to, like, almost the end of my finger, and so
Wow.
immediately, I'm like, "Okay, I gotta," like, as a kid, you
Call
watch all those
911.
well,
Yeah.
what would I ever do if I was bitten by a snake? I wouldn't get worked up. I know to not get worked up. It's about impossible. I wasn't even bitten, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta get my, like, breathing," like but, of course, like, you're panicking because 'cause you're thinking, "Did any
Oh,
venom
yeah.
get in there?" I knew I wasn't gonna die. I wasn't being silly about that, but I was going on a Colorado trip, like, a week in a week, and I was going to, like, help them set up elk camps and stuff in the mountains, and all I'm thinking is if that had venom in it, my finger and my hand is gonna be, like, black and sore, and how am I gonna do this stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So, what did you end up doing?
well, I immediately grabbed a rubber band and, like, wrapped it
I was
around the
about to
base of
ask
my
if you
finger.
tourniqueted it.
Yes, I did that, and of course, then I was feeling I don't know, I was feeling like before I did, like, it was, like, tingling and stuff, I was getting a little freaked out, but I went to an urgent care just to check.
You didn't even go to, like, an ER, you went to regular urgent care.
Yeah, I figured an ER, I'd have to sit there forever, so I went to the
That's
urgent
true.
care.
Good call.
So, it's weird to have to explain to them, I did not get bitten by a snake. I'm a taxidermist, and its fang cut me, like, they can't understand what
Yeah.
does that mean? So,
That's a
apparently
lengthy
the
explanation for
it
a
is.
a time when you don't need lengthy explanations, right?
Exactly, exactly, like, I'm a taxidermist, I was skinning a snake, and its fang cut me, blah, blah, blah. So, what they do is if you ever get bitten by a snake and you're not really having, like, immediate symptoms, they scrubbed it out really, really good, like, it would really hurt. And then they take your blood, and then they have to wait 6 hours and take your blood again to see if there's any development of, like, venom. And if there's not, you're good to go home.
When they scrubbed your finger, did they use a wire brush?
Oh gosh, no. It was like a really rough, like, sponge, like, almost like
Oh,
a Brillo pad
yeah. Oh my
thing.
gosh. That sounds
Yeah, and
did
it
they
had, like,
numb it at
soap.
least first?
No, no,
Oh.
it had, like, soap and stuff. I tell you though, I was shocked how sharp that fang was.
Well, did it slice, like, the length of your
Yeah,
finger?
yeah, and it wasn't, like, super, super deep, it was like a normal cut, but man, like, that quick with it was like a scalpel, just
Oh, and for
yeah,
it to it wasn't even alive anymore. It was just and you molded it, right? It was
yeah.
after
So I actually have its head in
oh.
my truck, like, in my one little truck compartment. I have one of its molded heads of the snake that sent me to the ER.
So,
Well, that was the thing, I
yes.
went to the urgent care.
Yeah.
It was, like, 6 at night or something, and they're like, "Well, we close at 8, and we need to take blood and then take blood in 6 hours, so you're gonna have to go to the ER." So then I had to go there anyways.
Mm. But so, did you need antivenom or
Nope. Thank goodness, because just them taking my blood alone and sitting in there for 6 hours was $1,200. So
oh, you couldn't leave either? You had to just
no,
wait?
yeah, I had to stay there. So
Oh.
they laid me in a hospital bed. It was completely empty, which was nice. Like, there was literally nobody else there. It was I don't know what it was, but it was completely empty. So I got to just, like, lay down in a bed, and I think I watched, like, Chopped or something on TV, a
Do you
cooking
remember
show.
what time of year it was too? Because if it happened,
I
like, in the middle of winter. That might be kind of ironic. Snake bite in the middle of cold Pennsylvania winter.
Yeah, it was August,
Okay.
you know, but I
Man.
had people coming in, they're like they, like, open the curtain, like, "You're the girl that got bit by a snake?" No, I did not get bit by a snake.
That's a great story though, that
Yeah, yeah, it was terrifying. Like I said, when you get bit by a snake, you think like, you think of yourself in different situations, you know, "What would I
yeah.
do if I was robbed or something?" Well, you probably aren't gonna be like what you think you're gonna be like.
No, you can anticipate that all you want, but
Yeah, yeah. I know I walked up to the guy that, I was renting the shop from, that I had learned from, because he was outside, like, I think they were working on their pool or something, and I had my finger all wrapped up, and I'm like, "So, I'm not scared, and I don't think that there's any venom in my finger, but I got sliced with a rattlesnake fang. Do you think I should go to the doctor?" And he was like, "You probably should just to be safe."
oh man, yeah, that's worth, the
Yeah,
$1,200
yeah, I don't know
precaution.
about that.
Well, maybe not actually, but
Yeah,
no,
but
that's a crazy story. That would be a
yeah.
good one for like, that game, Two Truths and a Lie.
Oh, yeah, that would be
That
a
would be
good
a good
one.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but that's I think my only crazy story like that, so
I bet you're way more careful now
oh,
handling snakeheads.
oh my
Not that you
gosh,
weren't
every
before,
time.
but,
I know, but every time I handle them now, I, like, almost get like, my hands get clammy and stuff, like, I just get nervous because I remember that,
'cause you've
and,
been down that road before.
yeah. So what I do now, just as a little I should probably say this for another thing, but what I do when I skin snakes now, because their mouths are, like, really, really watery when they're dead. Like, it's
Hmm.
just it's messy, it's, like, hard to grab. So, if you don't have anything there, you're trying to grab their lip skin, and you're skinning it just like you skin anything else. You leave a little bit of lip skin on the inside, you skin around the mouth, and it slides down off. I put a cotton ball in their mouth now,
Mm.
and that works perfect. It sucks up all that moisture, which makes it, less of a chance that it's going to slip out of your hands and you're going to accidentally stab yourself. And kind of the fangs are in the cotton ball.
You think you could put, like, a little bit of borax in the mouth, like, to kind of,
Mm,
like, absorb it, or would that not really work? I've never worked on a snake like that,
yeah.
so I really am just theorizing.
Yeah. I don't think it'd soak it up as much as, like, for instance, just a cotton ball does.
Yeah.
It just fits perfect in its mouth, like putting an apple in a pig's mouth. It just,
And then you don't, run the risk of, like, bumping into the fangs as much, right?
yes. Because it's always scary that it's going to slip out of your fingers and a fang's going to catch it. Because you can see the venom in their fangs.
Can you?
Yeah,
I've
like, you can see
never worked on a snake mouth.
little bubbles in the fang.
Oh.
So, I was just glad I didn't get some bacterial infection either because as dirty as their mouths are.
Yeah, even if you didn't get the venom in you, it's
Yeah,
oh, and
yeah.
you got cut. I mean, yeah, you got cut while you were working on an animal. That's always kind of gives you a little bit of a pause, like, And
Yeah.
then for it to be a snake and then a snake fang,
Yeah, of all things,
jeez,
like,
double whammy, triple whammy.
yes, that is a triple whammy. So we plan to cover more threats like this to our health as taxidermists in future episodes as well. So please let us know of any diseases or sicknesses or viruses that you either may have experience with or something that you want to hear more about. That would be really helpful for us.
Yeah, let us know, like, or have you contracted any of these diseases that we've talked about? That would be super interesting to know as well.
Yeah, yeah, that would be kind of interesting to hear those stories, kind of like my little snake cut
Yeah,
story.
yeah, that's crazy.
We would like to thank you for listening to our new podcast, Wildverse, and we hope you enjoyed learning about the things that we should always keep in the back of our minds as taxidermists to stay safe. If you would like to, you can follow us on Facebook at Wildverse Taxidermy Podcast or Instagram at Wildverse Podcast.
And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Wildverse Podcast, to see when new videos come out. Or you can leave us some love on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen by leaving us a review.
Yes, and we hope you have a great week. And hey, please don't forget to order more gloves.
And wear them.
Yeah, yeah, wear them gloves.